Wendy is the Republican, Conservative, and Reform Party candidate for U.S. Senate, and she's running to end the career of Chuck Schumer. Let's give a warm welcome to Wendy Long.
Thank you, Phil. I guess everybody in this room knows who Chuck Schumer is. Well, I want to tell you something. The people sitting here, you're all leaders. Obviously, that's why you're here. Leaders of the Queens Village Republican group. You have an incredible power in this exciting election year. You, the people in this room, have the power to tell Chuck Schumer something that not even Donald Trump can tell him. And that is, you are fired. And I want you all to say that, and to get 10 of your friends to say that. This is a grassroots campaign in a year when, as Phil said, I have never held public office. I've been a lawyer. I've worked for small family businesses, and most recently I've been a homeschool teacher of my kids and a bunch of other kids. So I've never held public office. But I was inspired to do this by something that my old boss, Justice Clarence Thomas at the Supreme Court, said to me after my parents died. He said it after my mom died, actually. I had taken care of her for 5 years. She had ALS and she was completely paralyzed. And after she died, my wonderful boss, Justice Clarence Thomas, said to me, Wendy, I don't know how to tell you, what to tell you in your sorrow. He said, but here's what I will tell you. What you need to do is go out and live your life in honor of her. And he said the same thing when my dad died. Go out and live your life in honor of your great parents and the great life that they gave me. And so I have had the sense, and I had this sense 4 years ago when I ran and came to this wonderful club. And by the way, this is the best club. My husband and I are members of the Queen Village Republican Club. And Phil and Joe and Arlene and everybody, Jim, who do such a great job. We're really proud to be card-carrying members of the Queens Village Republican Club. But this is the heart of republicanism. It's sort of like mission territory. It's difficult ground here. But this just shows your strength, that we can take this message of freedom, this message of constitutionalism, of abiding by that Constitution. The Second Amendment question, Rabbi, was a great question. Our republic is in grave, grave danger. And that's the reason that I stepped up to run 4 years ago, and I think it's in even greater danger now than it was 4 years ago, after 8 years of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Chuck Schumer. And you know what? We haven't had just 8 years of Chuck Schumer. We've had 40 years of Chuck Schumer, because he has been a politician since he graduated from college. He got out of college and went right into public office. He hasn't done anything else, and that's a big part of the problem, because our founders set up this country to be a government of we the people. And as Lincoln said, of the people, by the people, and for the people. And when I was reading Phil's latest letter, the newsletter that came to me in the mail, or maybe it was the one before, but he started with this quote from Abraham Lincoln that said, if our country it will never be destroyed from the outside, but if it's to crumble, it will crumble from within, because we weren't able to live up to our founding principles. And I see that happening. That's really what the problem is. And one of those first founding principles is that we are supposed to be a government of the people. And what's happened is we have a class of people in Washington, D.C., who I like to call the ruling class, because that's what they think they are. They are the political establishment. Honestly, they're on both sides of the aisle. But they stay there forever. They take money from special interests. And in Chuck Schumer's case, if you look at the top 10 of his biggest donors, they're all the big financial institutions that we bailed out. Those are the people who are giving him, in this case, he's got almost $25 million in his bank account for campaigns. And this is what keeps their hold on power. And then he holds himself out and says, oh, I'm running to help the middle class. But what has he really done for the middle class? What he's done is he raises taxes, he raises regulations, and not just regulations, but special regulations that I think really empower big corporations, big business. And it really hurts small business, which is the backbone of America and the backbone of our economy. I think there's a really unholy alliance of big government and big business that he's behind. The other thing he's done is he pretends to be a friend to Israel. Pretends to be someone who believes that Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East, believes that he's standing up for national security. But do you know, just like Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer will not even utter the words Islamic terrorism. He won't even say those words. He is the consummate, politically correct, picking off the easy fruit all the time while he's doing all this damage to our economy and to our republic. He provided the deciding vote for Obamacare, which is doing so much to crush small business, raising our taxes, raising our health care premiums, and giving us worse health care. And while he's doing all this, do you know what he does? He goes around and holds press conferences and acts like it's a big deal for things like the bristles come off the charcoal brush that you use to brush your charcoal grill. Or there's this new product called caffeinated peanut butter, and he's all concerned about the caffeine in the peanut butter. And his latest thing a few weeks ago was, he said, well, we really need to get to work on creating more space between airline seats. And meanwhile, he's been there for decades in Washington, while when he went to Washington, our national debt was below $1 trillion, and it's now $19 trillion. So this is clearly somebody that hasn't been serving the interests of the middle class, hasn't been serving the national interest of America. He was behind the Gang of Eight amnesty immigration bill. Of course, we love immigrants. We're a country of immigrants. And what we're supposed to be is Americans. Once we get here, we all come together, and we live under a rule of law. We love legal immigrants, because we're all legal immigrants. My grandparents were. And when we come together, we're all Americans. But it diminishes us as Americans, and it diminishes us as all the great nationalities who come together when we don't have borders that mean anything, and we don't have laws that mean anything. We need those things. So I'm taking that message to Washington, that we've got to end the reign of professional politicians. And I've taken a pledge of term limits. And I believe we absolutely must have term limits so we can return to a citizen legislature. In addition to taking my own pledge to limit my terms, I would also introduce legislation that's for term limits. And I would say that we need to also, anyone who serves in Congress, in the Senate or the House, there must be a lifetime ban on making a profit from going back and lobbying Congress and selling your influence when you're out of office. I think if we enacted those two reforms, it would actually make a really big difference. And I'm definitely, for the question came up about education, I was the beneficiary of wonderful public schools, a couple generations ago when I was a little girl. Kids who go to public schools today don't have a prayer of getting the education that I got. They just don't have it. And so I think we absolutely need school vouchers. We need to put parents back in charge, and there needs to be competition among schools. I think we're very close to ending Common Core, and that has to be absolutely quashed. I would repeal the Federal Department of Education entirely and send education back down to the local level. And Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama love to talk about income inequality, and they like to remedy it at the other end with food stamps and welfare and all these social programs. The real inequality is at the beginning, when we don't give kids an equal education and they don't have the tools to be good citizens and to make a good living for their families. So I think the real clue to income inequality is at the beginning in the schools, and that's really the key.
Excuse me, there's not.
Okay, well, we'll take some questions. I'm almost finished. One second. So anyway, I will conclude and I'll go to questions. I will conclude and I'll go to questions, but I want you to know that there is a great, great energy this year in 2016 that I have never seen before, and I definitely didn't see in 2012, to kick out the people who are eating away and destroying our country in the way that Phil talked about, Abraham Lincoln said, from within. We've got to retake our country of we the people. And I feel like we stand in the shoes of our founders. Remember in the Declaration of Independence at the end, it said, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. And we stand in their shoes, and we should be pledging that to each other and fighting this fight together. So I ask you to join me, and I'll take questions. Well, for one thing, the United Nations is not really the venue where we can pursue our national interests very well. It hasn't turned into that. And I think one thing we need to remember is, for America, who is really the leader of the free world and has been historically, it's important for us to preserve American sovereignty and foreign relations and our decisions about how we're going to interact with other countries as it's prescribed in the Constitution, in the treaty clause. It should be a unilateral decision of our country exercising our sovereignty. And when we get involved in so many things internationally, there's this sort of globalist movement to take away sovereignty of many countries, notably ours, and get involved in these multilateral trade deals and other things that remove our sovereignty and remove our constitutional rights. So I think that we need to be very careful about going too far. We clearly also shoulder a big burden of the cost of the United Nations, and our taxpayers shouldn't be shouldering that cost. We need members to participate in that as well. They, you know, when our founders wrote the First Amendment, and they said there are two religious rights. One is the right to free exercise and against the establishment of any official state religion. That just meant that the state can't prescribe everyone is going to be Catholics, or everyone is going to be Jews, or everyone's going to be Protestants. The state can't say that. That was not in any way meant to be what the Supreme Court has now twisted it to be, which is nobody can practice any religion at all. That's not at all what the founders meant, and it's not what the Constitution meant. So I absolutely support the right of prayer in schools. And by the way, I've noticed a lot of schools, not only do they not pray, they don't even say the Pledge of Allegiance. My kids came home and I was finding out they weren't even saying the Pledge of Allegiance in school. Maybe because it says under God, I don't know, but it's really been taken to extremes, and I think that this lack of civic education and moral education and religious education is part of that decay that Abraham Lincoln and Phil spoke of, decay from within, because kids aren't being brought up in this strong moral tradition and patriotic tradition that preserves the traditions of our country.
And this is a very serious question, because I will come at it here. How are you going to win, and what can we do to help you win? Because everything else to me is moot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously, it's not about money, because Chuck Schumer has $25 million, and I don't.
I can write you a check.
Well, no, but the first thing, I would like for everyone in this room, if you have a computer, to go to my website, go to the website, click on my announcement video, watch it, sign up for email updates, and to volunteer and to be on my team. And believe me, we will contact you, we'll ask you for help. We're building a grassroots team in all 62 counties. I'm obviously running statewide, so it's 62 counties. But the thing is, I really think this year especially, we've seen, you know, Jeb Bush spent, what, over $100 million for nothing. So money isn't the answer to everything, and I think we can do this without money, but it will take bodies, it will take grassroots. So what it will take is getting an army of people to contribute maybe $10. This is I have one thing in common with Bernie Sanders. I love small donors. I love $10 donors. Because $10, I don't want to take a lot of money from people. I want people who care, who want to make a small donation, and who are willing to sign up for the Army. That's what I want. So if you'll go to the website and do that, that would be great. That's number one. Number two, follow me on social media, because we have a lot of people now, frankly in all parties and independents, who are really getting skeptical of what the mainstream media is telling them. They don't like it as a source of news, and they're using Facebook and Twitter and all these other sources of information. So that can spread like wildfire, and we need to use that to reach out to our friends. And of course, good old-fashioned word of mouth, but small contributions, telling friends, word of mouth, and signing up to volunteer. Now, that's what I'm asking of you. My plan is I'm studying up on Chuck Schumer, and I'm getting, believe me, a lot of great information about the ways in which he has basically been bought and paid for. And I think that's what people are interested. They're interested in even more than, oh, well, I'd do something different with taxes, I'm for tax reform. What they really don't like, and obviously we're outnumbered in voter registration in New York. So we've got to convince some Democrats and certainly independents, and we have to have high Republican turnout. But to win, I need to show independents and Democrats that Chuck Schumer really is corrupt, that he is selling his influence, that he's passing laws that favor big banks because they give him money, that he's doing. So I think that's a strategy I'm going to work on. The problem is that the mainstream media would love not to cover it. So we've got to package it and explain it and make it very pointed. And I think I'm going to be able to do that. We could, even without repealing the Department of Education, we could just make it an agency that takes care of giving the vouchers, and they could be tax credits. I don't have a detailed plan, and there are many plans. I'd support just about any plan that increases school choice, and I think vouchers are ideal. Ideally, I'd like to get rid of the Department of Education, but certainly we can take baby steps toward that, toward school choice and toward vouchers. But that's the ultimate goal, is to get all of educational policy at the lowest possible level, which is state and preferably local, to have school choice and to have vouchers. Because that's what it says in the Constitution. Our founders set it up that way, and they set it up so we'd have a bicameral legislature, the House and the Senate, and the House was set up to be 2 years so that they were supposedly, much more responsive to shorter term swings in their constituents and electorate. They were much more sort of nimble and responsive to what the mood of the electorate was. The Senate, excuse me, was 6 years because they were supposed to be more, and initially, remember, the Senate was elected by state legislatures. They weren't even elected by direct election of the people under the original Constitution. And the reason for that was to make them less susceptible to public pressure, to have them be able to be more detached, more thoughtful, more contemplative, and have that balance of those two influences in the legislature. The problem is, when the founders set it up, they envisioned a real citizen legislature in both of those houses of Congress. And what's happened is we now have this professional political class, so that 2 years and 6 years basically don't really mean anything anymore, because these people stay for, thank you, Phil, stay for essentially a lifetime if they're able to. And that's the problem. And I hear you about not wanting term limits if there's somebody great, but the hottest ticket right now is Hamilton on Broadway, and there's this great song in it about George Washington when he's leaving, and everybody wanted Washington to stay. It was unthinkable that the country could go on without him. But it did, and he in his wisdom stepped aside. And I think, if the country can do without George Washington, it can do without anybody who's now in Congress, so. Well, there are really three responses to that, I think. One is, he's not wielding any really successful influence for us right now. For example, New York City's anti-terrorism funding was cut in half. And that shows he has absolutely no influence. I mean, and he acted surprised and shocked, and he came out and held his press conference and stamped his foot and said, "This shall not stand." Well, why were you so shocked? If you were doing your job, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. So that's the first answer. The second answer is, I think precisely because he wants to be majority leader, he's interested in his own power. He's courting all these other senators all around the country, sprinkling money to them, is concerned about courting them. He's not worried so much about us back here in New York because he's worried about courting influence with all these senators from other states. And then I guess my third response would be, here's what he really does for New York. He increases our taxes, so he takes a whole lot of money into Washington, and then he comes back to New York and travels all around like Santa Claus with a big pack of money over his shoulder, and he sprinkles it out here and there, $200,000 for this volunteer fire department. But guess what? That was our money to begin with. He's not doing us any favors. So those are my answers.
Thank you so much, Wendy.